Now, those two letters were written the same day, the last two letters from Ugartetia to Kos, but I believe strongly one of them mailed early in the day and the second one was mailed later in the day. And I'll tell you, I think that Kos's responses will tell you why I believe that to be the case. So Kos and Goliad, these letters, there are 4 documents that we found that are dated October 1, 1835, and they're from General Kos. The first one, I believe, is after he got the first letter from Ugartetia, which wasn't quite as bad. He did say they declared war. But after the first letter, I think this is his response. He says, it really doesn't bother me that the village of Gonzales is reluctant to surrender the cannon. He says this is a trivial matter, and he said you should march to Gonzales and leave Behar guarded and go ahead and get that cannon. And he said, I still haven't decided which direction I will follow. I don't know whether I'll go to Gonzales or whether I'm going to go ahead and go to Behar. So this was his early morning response, okay? Which, by the way, I think you can see here. Now, it doesn't have a time on this first one, but this second document from Kos to Ugartetia is dated the same date, but it says 11:30 p.m. It says in the document. And I believe this is after he receives Ugartetia's second note. And now all of a sudden he's ramped up. He's, in his first note of the very same day, he said it's a trivial matter. But all of a sudden he said, I want you to go with 100 cavalrymen and the preferential companies of the Morelos Battalion. These were the veteran companies. So probably you're looking at another 100 men there. So that's 200 men. And he said, I want that 8-pound cannon brought from Gonzales to the city of Behar. And he said, use the other 100 cavalrymen, the dragoons that you have that are already there with Castaneda. He said, bring a battle cannon if you need to. And he calls this scandalous conduct of the authorities of Gonzales. But he does say your decisions should always be thoughtful and made with prudence and circumspection. So he doesn't want him to mess up and just start a total war here. He says, give the alcalde the document that I'm including. So he's sending not only Ugartetia letters, but he's also sending Ponton a letter. He says, give him this letter, give him a set amount of time to answer, and no moratoria. He doesn't get to put things off. It's a set amount of time, and then you're going after that cannon. Now he does add, do not allow your troops to commit excesses of any types. They're to have a religiously extreme respect for properties, even those of the captains of the rebellion. So we're calling it a rebellion now. And he says it's important for them to know that the troops of the supreme government are disciplined and want nothing else but that the laws are respected. So he doesn't want them looting and pillaging and burning down the town. He just wants the cannon back. The third document is the document he mentioned in the previous document, the one that's sent to Ponton. Okay, this is Kos now writing to Ponton, and Ugartetia is supposed to deliver it to him. And in it, part of the letter, he says this is very scandalous conduct and it will produce a great deal of evil primarily to you if you do not immediately make the stated delivery of the cannon. And he goes on to say the consequences ultimately will weigh on you personally. And he tells him you should know that you won't just be fighting with a small force of Mexicans, but the entire Mexican nation known for its seriousness, tolerance, and characteristic kindness. So it's a pretty good threat here. Now we do have one more player just on the periphery, but he's important because all these documents got sent to him, and some of them I found in the Mexican military archives because they were sent to Tornell. So Kos, his fourth document of October 1 is a letter to his boss. Now he's writing his boss, the Secretary of War, and he's telling him what's going on. And he tells him that the village of Gonzales, they want to have their own way. They've started by disarming and imprisoning 4 soldiers, which are refusing to turn over an 8-pound cannon which exists there improperly. And he sends him all these copies. He says, I'm sending you the copies of all the documents. And I love this part. He goes, if you consider my presence necessary at that distant place, 30 leagues from where I am, I can begin the march immediately. I love that because he's writing Secretary of War from Goliad, Texas to Mexico City. And it's going to take, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks for that document to get to Mexico City, and another 2 or 3 weeks for the document to get back. But he's sitting there saying, if you want me to march, I'll do so immediately. So obviously he knew he wasn't going to march to Gonzales and get involved in it. He knew he wasn't going to have the reply, but the bravado's there. Now, all this was going well and good, and what happened was that it all got interrupted. Coast never went to Behar, he never went to Gonzales. Ugarte never went to Gonzales. Because as we know, on October 1, something happened. A lot of these documents we found in the Bexar County archives, but we also went to the Benson library where a lot of the Hispanic documents are, and I found this very short document that you see here. And I think that we have evidence that one other person had run across it, but I'm not sure they understood what it was. Luckily, because of all my archival work and because I have a lot of patients who are Spanish speaking, I had taught myself fairly decent Spanish, and I found this document and I realized right away that this was big. This was written the same day of the Battle of Gonzales at 1 p.m. And it's written by the commander of the Mexican troops who were involved in the battle, Castaneda. And when I first translated this, it was fairly easy. It's like 200 Americans attacked me at 5 in the morning, and he said they had a medium piece and a small piece of ordnance, an esmeril. I had to look kind of hard to find the translation for esmeril. But when we found that esmeril is a fairly common term for little bitty small piece of ordnance, small cannons, then it struck me that the medium piece was very likely the come and take it cannon, the one described in all these Mexican documents, and the esmeril might be that little cannon. Okay? So that's why my title page, those of you who are very observant, said the tale of the Gonzales cannon, but it said cannons. It's our impression, Jim Woodrick and myself and several others now, that it's very possible that the small cannon they have there actually took place in the battle and was fired, but was not the cannon that the Mexican army was coming after. He tells that his only loss has been one private of the 1st Permanent Company of Tamaulipas, and he died of a carbine bullet. That's another thing I think that the seriousness of that skirmish is often overrated. The Texans reported that they killed a lot of Mexicans. There's not any evidence that that's the case. Apparently they did have one die. Note, I think one Texan was wounded. So it wasn't much of a battle. A lot of it was in the fog, a lot of it was a running battle. So they weren't very close. They did a lot of shooting, but not much damage. I throw this in to show you a cannon that was definitely not the come and take it cannon. This cannon's too big. This cannon's in Russia, and I just throw that in for a little humor. That cannon's bigger than the come and take it cannon, but the way it kept becoming bigger and bigger, it might have eventually reached that point. So the big question is this the esmeril, or I think it's definitely un esmeril, and I think that it's very possible that this cannon was at the Battle of Gonzales and actually fired against the Mexicans. But the documents that I've shown you, I think, give a pretty clear argument that the cannon that the Mexicans were looking for was a bronze or a brass cannon, and that it was a much bigger cannon. I want to show you this slide, and it's just out of curiosity. If indeed the come and take it cannon was a 4 or a 6 pound brass cannon, we have pretty good evidence that the come and take it cannon was taken to San Antonio, to Behar, and used by the Texans when they laid siege to Behar in 1835. And of course, General Coase was in command there, and in December of 1835 he surrendered and they left. But we believe the Texans took the come-and-take-it cannon with them. Now, I'm a member of the San Jacinto Battleground Conservancy, and we had a cannon donated to us that was supposedly an Alamo cannon, and it was a bronze cannon, and it's a 4-pounder. I didn't particularly believe at the time that it was an Alamo cannon, but we've done some serious research, and I still can't prove that this cannon is an Alamo cannon, but I'm about 75% convinced that this cannon was captured by the Texans when they took, or by the Mexicans, and then of course retaken by the Texans when Mexico abandoned Behar in 1836. But this is a bronze cannon. We've got it refurbished at Texas A&M in their conservation lab, and it's now at the Alamo. It's in the chapel on the first room on the left. But this cannon is the right size, and it's possible there were probably 4 or 5 brass cannons or bronze cannons of the right size that could have been. So there's a chance that this cannon that's actually at the Alamo could be the come-and-take-it cannon. If I had to guess, I'd say it's not the one, but it's one of those cannons that was actually at the Alamo. So I'm going to leave it up to you. I've given you the information, and I'm going to leave it up to you to decide, but I hope this sheds some new information on the Mexican archives and what the Gonzales come-and-take-it cannon probably was. And we're going to take a few minutes here, and then we are going to take some questions.